Welcome to the most incredible 30 minutes of edutainment in the entire known universe. It's Morning Bytes with me, Stu Panansky, Violet Sullivan, and Jason Rebholz. This is our monthly show to talk about the most important cyber topics of today. We talk about all things cyber, privacy, technology, and everyone's favorite cyber insurance. Please welcome our special guests. She is the head of global cyber development at CFC. She's an entrepreneur, a thought leader, a keynote speaker, and Barry Rapkin's #1 fan. Welcome to Lindsay Marr. Welcome, Lindsay.
What an introduction. Thanks for having me.
#2, I hope this works. She is the national practice leader and a cyber risk strategist of USI Insurance Services. She develops strategy, builds relationships, designs creative and very beautiful insurance solutions. She knows everything about cyber. It's Nadia Hoyt. Do we have audio, Nadia? Oh, no.
We will. She's going to work on it.
All right. The views and opinions expressed here are solely our own and not those of our employers. Definitely don't bother our employers with what we say. Thanks to our friends at the relentlessly rapid, exceptionally skilled, and strategically innovative cyber recovery consulting firm Phoenix 24, we're trying something new today, an audience giveaway. If you're listening, leave a comment and make one of us laugh. The first 3 comments to make one of us laugh wins a $100 Amazon gift card, some Phoenix 24 cool swag, and bragging rights for the rest of the year. That's right.
Or the month.
It's our show. We get to decide the winners, and there are no appeals. Let's get the conversation started. Jason, what has been on your mind since the holidays?
Well, something pretty recent that I am very interested to get everyone's take on from a privacy perspective. So OpenAI, our favorite future robot overlord, just came out with a new feature called ChatGPT Health. And so their whole thing here is that they're saying 230 million people every week use ChatGPT to ask a health-related question. So they have come out with a new feature that is going to allow you to connect in your medical records and your wellness devices to give you more accurate information and guidance on any of the health questions that you might have. So, this could be things that are like understanding recent test results. It could be preparing for doctor's appointments, even getting just advice on diet or workouts, anything like that. But it's pulling in your medical information to do this. Now, before we go ham on them, because there's definitely some opinions here, one of the interesting things is that they're trying to take a secure approach with this by creating a separate workspace for it that is trying to just segment off some of that data so it doesn't leak back into your standard ChatGPT instance, but it can pull some of the context from your regular ChatGPT. So whatever you're using on the daily side. So if you're asking questions about, hey, like I'm getting ready to move or anything like that, it can actually draw that in and try to say like, oh, is this more of a stress indicator, that sort of thing. But I'm sure everyone has thoughts here on, what is this going to mean? And is this something you're going to use yourself? So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah,
Violet, why don't you lead off? I know you're going to have an opinion on this.
Well, I'll say from a user perspective first, because you and I have a mutual friend who actually had a health folder in his GPT already. He already had different questions, and I asked different questions from a health perspective, but I choose what I ask in my prompts specifically and mostly put it in hypothetical terms, not giving it my exact vitals and details and biometrics. However, from a user perspective, they don't even make it easy. So even if there are privacy concerns, let's talk about the user interface didn't allow him to actually import any of his health information that he'd asked about. So preferences and specifics, he wouldn't let him input it into ChatGPT Health. So we already know there's an issue. And we're gonna get feedback.
Interesting.
Sam, call up Sam and give him feedback.
Can I be the contrary opinion on this one? I don't think it's a terrible idea. I have to say that I think it gives access to information to people and an ability to manage and advocate for themselves from a healthcare perspective in a way that's never been available before. There are stories all over about people who put their blood test results into one of the LLMs and it comes back with information or warning signs to be on the lookout for, things that their doctors did not talk to them about. And then they would go back to their doctors and say, well, what about this? And it would open up an entire new avenue of exploration from a medical perspective. There are stories about people who have had random ailments who used the AI to help better identify what their prognosis was. And so does it replace the idea of a doctor? No, of course not. But it does, I think, allow the user, the individual, a lot more freedom and opportunity to advocate for themselves.
It's an accessibility thing, right? And I think that's like the key thing is how many people is this going to help? And you still choose what you get to connect to it, right? So yeah, I'm kind of there with you, Stu. Lindsay, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about it is that the knowledge and the information that you get out of any Gen AI tool is only as good as the information that goes into it. And, from a personal perspective, I'm a bit of a health phobe myself, but I'm looking for a certain answer with it. So sometimes when it comes to stuff like that, I will direct my questions in a way that gives me the answer that I want back. And so you're only going to get that information based on the quality of your question. And even then, whatever you trust coming out of it is only good as however many people before you have gone and done the same thing, obviously, right? So I think the other implication with that too is, there's no disclaimer about collection of that information just as a holistic level with any Gen AI tool. So you don't know what's happening to that data that you put into it. And people are using them as if it were a private messaging system. And the reality is it is absolutely not that. So yeah, it makes me a little bit nervous personally, but I suppose there's got to be a lot more education around the trust you put into that. And absolutely, I could see a lot of people over-diagnosing or potentially under if they don't want to see that information and what that means for what they take to their healthcare practitioner.
That was one of the use cases I really liked is how do you prepare for a doctor's appointment? Like just like what information should be bringing, things like that. I think there's some value there, but yeah. Nadia, you get your audio fixed? Still working on it.
I have my audio.
Yes.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Happy Friday, right?
Happy Friday.
I can't believe this. So I missed the beginning of the question. But from what I could assume, we're sort of talking about use cases of healthcare and AI tools in either diagnosing and or treating folks.
So ChatGPT is now letting you connect your medical data and wearable devices. Yay or nay?
I would have to say nay for now, yay for the future. I just don't think we're ready right now. We don't have enough understanding around, and I think Lindsay brings up a great point in terms of the data and the quality of the data, but also how the data is being scrubbed to ensure that it's actually doing what we want it to do. I just don't think we have that. We don't have enough in place in terms of paradigms to understand how we treat and refresh the data to just make sure that it aligns with, sort of today's diagnoses versus utilizing use cases from the past that may not be as relevant for the future. With respect to where we are right now,
Alan wins the first prize.
There are with respect to where we are right now, I just don't think we've done enough to determine the quality of the data in order for us to do that. But I do think that is what the future is going to be.
And Jason, is this patients entering data themselves to diagnose, or do you see this going to healthcare practitioners themselves and professionals using AI tools to help with what they give back to patients as well? Because that's the obvious step, isn't it?
They're trying to make this distinction that it is not supposed to replace a doctor, but it's supposed to augment your care, right? So it's more, I would see this more of a, hey, I got some blood results back. Can you just help me understand what this all means, right? So, I mean, effectively, it's replacing what we're all Googling anyway, potentially. But yeah, it's, to your point before, Lindsay, it's how are people going to use it? Like, it's all going to come down to the questions that they ask, and like, you know, it's gonna dictate how that is. What it's gonna return to you, whether that's positive or negative, whatever you want.
Yeah. I mean, on the positive side, like if we're going to put a silver lining to this and not think everything AI is scary, as many people tend to do, you know, I think it could be helpful for people who are afraid to ask certain questions or follow-ups to diagnosis. So if you need help understanding terminology or you want more explanations of medical concepts, great. If it's for the actual diagnosis itself, yeah, to Nadia's point, I think that's got to have a lot of education and best practice usage out of it.
Yep, we're definitely not there. I think, Nadia, your point on it's trust.
Well, I do also think that there's a fine line that we're also could be quite exciting in the future. You know, when it comes to health and the evolution of women's health and evolution of men's health, you know, after a pediatrician, you have just the one doctor who does, you know, everything. How awesome would it be to utilize ChatGPT to begin to further develop specialties at different stages of your lives? You know, from a woman's perspective, it is dealing with sort of the concepts of perimenopause and menopause, and being able to utilize that to help supplement the big span of adult health to geriatric health. I think that would be awesome.
And think about, Nadia, like give me a brainstorm. It's like you can also modify it for different socioeconomic backgrounds. So thinking about the inputs and outputs that you have, and you have to communicate to different audiences, like that's a game changer, because instead of just bedside manner, it's like you could have direct applicable examples and restrictions.
More personalized.
It's personalized care.
But we're too early.
And that's the trend in a lot of industry sectors. So it's not just medicine and education as well. You know, the idea is to collect universal data on someone. So this way, not in a nefarious way to, you know, be all spooky, but to actually enable better life results. If you have intelligence about every ailment that you ever had as a person in an electronic AI database, and you're able to then make better predictions about your future health outcomes. In education, if you are monitoring a student's progress at the granular level through AI, you can create individualized educational programs for that student so they get a better result for themselves, because, you know, not one size fits all in medicine or in education or in these other disciplines. So yeah, I'm bullish about the entire thing, and we'll figure out the security issues. You know, I laugh because from a legal perspective, I know the people who are putting in like confessing their crimes into ChatGPT, like, hey, I was, you know, I had a few too many drinks last night and I got into a little collision. What do I? And I'm like, whoa, don't say that. You know. So anyway, you want to anyway.
Let me just throw out there, because I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but Lindsay and Nadia, I'm curious, what extra layer of insurance did they have to think about before adding this product feature?
Oh.
Isn't that like
record scratch?
I mean, if it's, you know, from an enterprise or commercial perspective, obviously buying cyber insurance full stop would be the first course of action. But I think, and you sort of alluded to this in a recent post, Violet, anyways, but when we're talking about healthcare information, putting it into Gen AI tools or what browser extensions are picking up as well, you think about it as a privacy risk, but it is also absolutely a reputational risk as well. So what the secondary sort of fallout of that is, and I think that's what is probably the most overlooked, because we simply think about the data collection, whether that was wrongful collection or not, what happens if it's disclosed to somebody you don't mean to, all of which is, you know, typically addressed under cyber policies. But that reputational impact from business perspective is also comes into play in most good standalone policies today. So those would be the main points for consideration when scoping out policies. Nadia, I don't know if you have different views there, perhaps on the body injury side or.
Well, yeah, no, for sure, Lindsay. I mean, I think actually before we get to insurance, I think it's understanding what are some of the underwriting requirements for that. So I do think that being able to ensure that whether you're a user actively by virtue of your professional service or you're utilizing it as part of, you know, your everyday, almost like in an agentic way. I think you have to have a good understanding of what framework you're adhering to. And I think there has to be an established framework to adhere to if you're going to utilize it as part of the service that you're offering to others. And I think that should be a part of the underwriting. I think underwriters should have a view on, you know, what are you balancing this against? You know, how are you verifying the process? So I do think from an overall insurance perspective, that has to be in it. The only thing that I would say, I agree with you 100%. I do agree that there are vicarious risks that then would have to be understood better. You mentioned bodily injury for sure, property damage for sure. But I also think that some of the cyber risks, like the scope of data, you know, depending upon how you use it, is the scope of data, especially if the scope of data relates back to a specific regulation, whether it's federal regulation and or a state regulation, is that broad enough to really encompass the data that would carry forward in that particular, you know, for that particular tool? I'm not sure. I think it hasn't been exceptionally tested, but I do think that there are places where we may just want to think about, is it broad enough? There have been insurers that have just said that, you know, data is just anything that could identify an individual. But then there are a lot of insurers who have leaned into regulations as a verification tool of how they define data. So I think that yes, the tenets of the policy, you know, it's an open power. It's intended to really sort of trigger for it, but I do think that we may have to do some window dressing, and we had to do that you know, when we incorporated privacy, when we incorporated system failure coverage, when we incorporated all these other things, we had to do additional window dressing. And we may have to do that here.
That's such a good point, Nadia. Like, and it's such a bounce with insurers too, because we're in, you know, what I'd say is a hyper competitive market right now. Every time there's a new word that comes across, AI, not a new word, but certainly new for insurance, which is traditionally very old school. But AI, quantum computing, deepfake, things that are typically already addressed under cyber policies, people want to see affirmative language for. And Stu, you probably are, you know, with your legal background, you very well clued up on this, but it does tend to, the more we affirmatively name things, the risk it has of suggesting that by naming them, we're not naming other things that come up. So you do get a lot of insurers who will broad blanket that and say, well, it's data. We're not going to define exactly what that data is because it could mean anything. We want to make sure we encompass as much as possible. And then you do have other insurers who take the approach of, all right, we're going to name every single thing that comes up because the client wants to see that, brokers are asking for it. So yeah, it's a fine balance between getting that right in the insurance market.
Hey, Lindsay, let's stay with you and let's stay with some insurance. What are some stories that you've been paying attention to in the last few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of articles in the last, I think, probably 2-3 months now where, you know, the cyber insurance market, particularly in the US, exited a hard market cycle, the first hard market cycle in 2023, and the pendulum swung completely the opposite direction. We've now, in the US, there's over 200 markets selling a cyber insurance product. That's incredibly competitive. What it's done is nothing but good for the end client because they've got the optionality and they've got flexibility on where they place their insurance. But what it's also done is almost swing us too far in the opposite direction, that it is starting to come back around and sort of mirror the conditions that we saw going into 2020, where it was just before a hard market happened again. So premiums are as low as they ever have been. It's been more accessible than it ever has been. People are doubling limits and getting rate reductions for it. And I think great for the buyer, but sustainable, it's a bit risky at this point. And so a lot of the articles that I focused on in the last few weeks, and, you know, we've come out with commentary on this as well, but it's been, are we poised for the next hard market in the US, and what is sustainable, and how do we not necessarily increase rates, but certainly hold the line, and make sure, we're doing good by the client and brokers not having to remarket year on year every single year, as I'm sure Nadia is very used to having done in her position, but making sure that we have something sustainable for, the next 25 years.
So Nadia, that's a good pivot to you, coming from the broker side. But it is extremely competitive. Everybody's saying that the word soft market is probably uttered more times than any other phrase at the various cyber conferences. What is there something that needs to happen, or do you think something will happen, or what are your views there?
I almost think we need to change the way that we think about the cyber market. I think it's always going to be, it's not going to be the same as, sort of the property market. We're always going to have these mini cycles. So that I think we have to lean into being uncomfortable about the fact that there will be these mini cycles. So if that is a fact, we then have to understand how are we going to deal with that. I agree with you, Lindsay, being just exceptionally reactive every single time to these markets and not really taking the time to better understand what we should be doing and how we should be growing in order to create something more sustainable is something that I think I'm a little, I would just say, uneasy with right now. Less questions to better understand risk does not always equate in a better market. And so I do think that, we're in a marketplace where we have property and casualty have 100 and change years ahead of us. We're still learning. We don't have the actuarial breadth to really be able to develop models in the same way as the more traditional lines. So I like the fact that we have more markets. I'd like the fact that more markets start to not sell in the same way as the same other markets. I think that there is opportunity for markets to specialize in specific revenue bands and basically be able to lean in. There are a few markets who are doing that. They're not enough who definitely do it. I think there are different ways to buy and structure marketplaces. Goodness gracious, we have customers that have $500 million in revenue and ones that have several billion, and they're buying the same structure. They're buying $1 million retention and then buying on top of that. There has to be an evolution in how we treat different types of clients with different types of revenue bands, and then we have to lean into it. I also think we need to develop the assessment tools to better assess and be able to drive risk profiles. That's one thing that I think property and casualty got right. So I guess I agree with Lindsay in terms of just being a little bit challenged and concerned about, the ability to just decide to just lower rates and then that's it and that's what's sustainable. I think we almost devalue the market and we devalue the product when we lean in that way. I don't know, 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that the struggle too, like if we take the property comparison, right? Like there's only so many ways fire is going to burn, right? And there's only so many ways you're going to build a building, different materials and things of that nature. And, if we even just look at the last 2 years with everything with AI, and let's even go back further, right? 10 years ago, cloud was just starting to take off. 10 years before that, like that wasn't a thing. And so it's like the second that we start to capture enough data to really get our arms around it, suddenly now AI is a thing. And we have to jump to that. And maybe this is part with the cyclical nature of things, but I actually think it's probably 2 different cycles happening at the same time that we're trying to coordinate. And it's almost like we're trying to find the right orbit when both line up where we can actually get it right. And we can only get it for that small window before it all changes again. So it's that dynamic nature that we have to be adaptable enough and be quick enough to really understand it. But I think your point of let's do that without devaluing it. That's the key there. And I never heard somebody frame it that way, and I think that's the right way to really really think about it.
I mean, we've said this before, but we can't be selling a $10 product for $5. No market will, and some markets have already come out and say they definitely won't do that in the U.S. right now. And so and that that is a symptom of, clients demanding quite a bit and brokers giving them what they're asking for and pushing the insurers to be better and include more things. Most markets have really high cyber claims acceptance rates. So we're just about covering everything that there is. And when you look at the market cycles, one of the terms that tends to irk me is ever evolving landscape or changing threat landscape, because when we actually look at it over the last few years or 10, 20 years, the root causes of how things happen, ransomware, social engineering, fraud, system failure, those in themselves as general topics have not really changed a whole lot. What has changed, sometimes the scale of them and severity, but certainly not frequency. But what has changed is premiums and coverage. And so clearly the hard market and soft market is going to be spurned by the same amount of risk happening, but the premium is here one time, down here the other. And so that's obviously what spurns it on when it comes to cyber risk.
And threats itself have the same incentives too. It's all around money. It's all around cash. It's an economic, it's an economic process that we're saying it. I totally agree with you, Lindsay.
See, underwriters and brokers, dogs and cats hanging together. I love it. Now, I just want to run out of time. Why don't you tell us what story you were paying attention to this week? Because I just the half hour goes by so fast.
Oh, I mean, I think I know that it's gone on, but that sort of Beasley story, not so much what the comments were, but it goes back to what we're talking about in terms of just what the market looks like and what it has to do in order to truly develop. The one thing that I will say and just say very quickly that I also think that we haven't done a good job of really allowing or teaching our policyholders, whether it's a broker or insurer, how to value this product. We treat it like a commodity and they treat it like a commodity. And as a result, that's the only application and context that they have for it.
Wow.
My 2 cents.
I like it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I went through the exercise of buying cyber insurance for the first time, and I definitely was treating it like a commodity, even like being in the industry.
Jason.
But I will tell you, it was also one of the most painful things I went through trying to get insurance. So maybe we need to fix that.
Maybe you need a better broker.
I'm gonna.
No offense to whoever your
Let's
broker
talk.
Jason, out of curiosity, why did you buy then after not buying previously? What was your incentive? What about it was painful?
New company. So that was starting from day one. Wanted to have that, but there's some stories there that we can maybe another time.
We're gonna have a special Morning Bytes mock-up of your insurance buying scenario. We're gonna all play parts.
Let's dissect your policy, Jason. Let's get that.
Line by line. How nerdy could we get, Lindsay?
Nadia's loving it.
Well, I try to figure out how to use the last few minutes of our show. I could maybe just talk about a very quick story.
I think you guys have to choose the winners, Stu, from the people that have commented. Because I've got one. I threw out Alan Burson. You got to choose the last 2 winners that are going to get the gifts.
Geez. It's hard to pay attention to the show and pick winners at the same time. That's
all right. Fine, we'll do it after.
You'll do it after, yeah. All right, let's talk about our next month's guests, Violet.
Let me get the graphic ready. Hold on. Ready? Are you ready? Tee it up. Next month's guests are Aaron Ayers and Peter Hedberg.
All right, we are going to have a grand old time there. I have to thank this month's guests, Lindsay Marr, Nadia Hoyt. Please, everyone, follow them on LinkedIn. Follow Jason, follow Violet, follow me. I hope you had an amazing holiday season, and please keep the comments coming. We love it, and we'll see. We're going to do the same audience participation deal in February show, and we'll, depending on the feedback, we'll see how it goes. If you're interested in doing something like this, just contact us. Have a great month, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.